Alright, so in the last video we covered data types in Java, and in this video we are going to be covering variables. Now we kind of saw these variables in the last video, but in this video I kind of just wanted to go a bit more in depth into what variables were or what they are, and how to use them. So let's first off, let's create a new project. Use a template command line app, and then we can call it variables or whatever you'd like. So we can think of a variable as a box or a container that you can store stuff in, right? So basically in Java, that box would be called a variable, and as I said before, in that box or variable, you can store pieces of information like we saw in the last video, such as numbers, letters, words, etc. So how you define kind of a variable would be, first you would use the data type that you want, and then you would have a name for it. So let's just call it int value, like we did in the last video, and let's assign it a value of 4. So we keep thinking the variable as a box. We can see here that this would basically mean make a box that can store an integer in it, right? So as we saw in the other video, then int has a range of numbers that it can it can be from like 2 billion something to negative 2 billion, etc. So you're basically making a box that can hold that range of numbers, right? And you want to call, and this basically says call that box int value, and then equals 4 would be put the value 4 in the box. So then that box would be worth, or would equal to 4. So just to make sure that that box that we have is equal to 4, we can print it out by putting system.out.println, right? Or a simpler version is just put s out. It's for system out, right? That stands for system out. So then we can put int value, int value, and we can run it, and we got a value of 4, right? Now we can also have different boxes or variables that you can define with different data types. So that we could have a double, and we can name the double value equals, and then whatever you'd like to be, like 6.2, 6.3. We can also print this out to make sure that our variable is equal to 6.3, as we assigned 6.3 to the double value. Alright, so yeah, here printed 6.3, which is the value that we assigned it to. Now we can also make kind of variables out of strings. So we can call it string value, which we can set it equal to hello, right? And we can print it to make sure. We can assign hello to that variable, and it should print out hello. And it did. Yeah, so that is basically how variables work, and how you define them in your code. And you can also kind of add variables together, and set them equal to different numbers without having, or set the same kind of variable equal to another number without having to declare it again or define it again. Because to change the value of a variable, we will just set a double value, or the name of the variable, right? So let's use int value equal to a numbers, so we can have 5. So here we could print it out, and we can see that the variable int value changed from the value 4 to 5. And we can see that it has a value of 4, or a 5, sorry. We can do the same with strings. You can change the value back, or say bye, and we can print it out. Oops. String value. Oops. String value. And it should say bye. Just a tip: when you're printing variables or text out, you kind of want to use, when you want to print out text, then you use the quotes. When you want to print out the values of a variable, you want to use the variable name without quotes. Alright. So as I said before, we can also add and subtract and manipulate kind of these variables. So we could add int value to, let's say, int value. Well, let's create a new variable and call it int value 2 equal to 5, right? Alright, so if we wanted to kind of subtract, add two variables together, and do that kind of thing, multiply variables together, etc. So what you would do is create a new data or variable with whatever data type that corresponds to the two variables that you want to add together. So we can call this variable sum, which would be equal to let's add int value and int value 2 together. Oops, int value 2 together, and we can print this out, sum. So we can sum equals, and then as you can print out the sum, which should be equal to 10. Nice. So we can see how int value 2 would be equal to 5. Then since we changed the value of int value, it would take the latest kind of value that was assigned to it, and that's the one that it would use for that calculation. If we remove this, then it would be 9, since it's taking this value instead of the one that we had before. And since int value 2 is not changed throughout the whole, or after this, it'll have the same, it would kind of use the same value that it was assigned to it, which is 5. Alright, so that is basically how variables work. You'll be using variables throughout all of your, or in all of your programs, unless it's a very simple and kind of not very useful application. Hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.